Quick disclaimer, this is an AI voice, which is not going to be perfect. There is a transcript in the description as well as subtitles for you to read along with. A market is where there are buyers who demand the goods and services and sellers who supply the goods and services. Demand is the amount of a product that a consumer is willing to buy or consume at a certain price at a given point in time. Consumers have many objectives and make many decisions when purchasing a product or service. The objectives consumers will have include being satisfied with the product, getting the best value for money, and the convenience of purchasing and using the product. When deciding what product they want, consumers must make choices based on their preferences, needs, and budget constraints. Consumers also take into account the marginal utility that they receive from purchasing more of a product. This is where the consumer will only pay the price that equals the amount of satisfaction that they receive from the product, while receiving less satisfaction as they purchase more of a product. Consumers will also try to purchase products where they receive a better value for the time, money, and effort that they put in. As they make purchasing decisions, factors like income, prices, and substitute products influence their choices. The demand curve is represented on a graph and shows the relationship between the price of a good or service and the quantity demanded by consumers. According to the rule of demand, there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, where the quantity demanded will increase if the price decreases, and vice versa. This negative slope of the demand curve shows how consumers are willing to purchase more of a product at low prices and less at higher prices. The demand curve shows how price can affect overall demand and helps businesses and governments understand how various factors impact market equilibrium. A change in the demand can be shown in two ways: through a movement or a shift. A movement along the demand curve occurs when there is a change in the price of the good or service, which leads to a change in the demand. This movement reflects the rule of demand, where higher prices decrease the quantity demanded and low prices increase it. A shift in the demand curve occurs when factors other than price of the good or service changes. If the quantity demanded increases because of these changes, then the demand curve will shift to the right, whereas if the quantity demand decreased because of these changes, then the demand curve will shift to the left. There are many factors that can cause a shift in the demand curve, including changes in the prices of substitutes and complementary goods, changes in real incomes, changes in tastes and fashions, advertising and branding, changes in size and age distribution of the population. A substitute is a replacement for another good, which may cause the demand for the original product to decrease if the substitute is cheaper than the good. This can also cause the demand for the original product to increase if the substitute is more expensive than the good. A complementary good is something that is sold with the original good, which can cause the demand for the original product to decrease if the price of the complementary good is more expensive, so the consumer will have to pay more for the goods altogether. This can also cause the demand for the original product to increase if the price of the complementary good is cheaper, so the consumer will have to pay less for the goods altogether. Real income is the income that has been adjusted for inflation, reflecting the actual purchasing power of what individuals have earned in terms of the quantity of goods and services they can buy. This can cause the demand of the original product to decrease. If real incomes decrease, then consumers will have less spending power and will not be able to purchase as many products and services. This can also cause the demand for the original product to increase. If real incomes increase, then consumers will have more spending power and will be able to purchase more products and services. Changes in tastes and fashions can cause the demand for the product to decrease if they move away from that product and it becomes less desirable. Changes in tastes and fashions can also cause the demand for the product to increase if they move towards the product and it becomes more desirable. Advertising and branding can cause the demand for a product to decrease if it worsens the product's perceived value or the business's reputation, as it will push consumers away from that product and business. Advertising and branding can also cause the demand for a product to increase if it improves the product's perceived value or the business reputation, as it will bring consumers towards the product and business. Changes in the size of a population can change the demand for a product. This is because there may be less people to purchase the product, which will decrease the demand, or more people in the population to purchase the product, which will increase the demand. Changes in the age distribution of the population will change the demand for the product, as products will be targeted for specific age groups. So if the amount of people in a particular age group changes, then the demand for products that target the age group will change. Supply is the amount that suppliers are willing and able to produce at a given price at a given point in time. Producers have many objectives and make many decisions when supplying goods or services. The objectives of producers include maximizing profit, ensuring efficient production, and meeting market demand. When deciding what goods or services to supply, producers must make choices based on available resources, production costs, and market conditions. Producers also take into account the marginal cost of producing additional units of a product. This is where the producer will only supply the quantity at which the cost of producing an extra unit equals the revenue generated from selling it, while considering diminishing returns as more units are produced. Producers will also aim to supply products where they achieve the best balance between quality and cost effectiveness. As they make supply decisions, factors like competition, technology, and consumer preferences influence their choices. The supply curve is represented on a graph and shows the relationship between the price of a good or service and the quantity supplied by producers. According to the law of supply, there is a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied, where the quantity supplied will increase if the price rises, and vice versa. This positive slope of the supply curve shows how producers are willing to supply more of a product at higher prices and less at low prices. This is because producers will be able to receive higher sales revenue when goods and services are at a higher price, and will receive less sales revenue when goods and services are at a low price. The supply curve demonstrates how price can affect the overall supply, aiding businesses and governments in understanding how various factors influence market equilibrium. A change in supply can be shown in two ways: through a movement or a shift. A movement along the supply curve occurs when there is a change in the price of the good or service, which leads to a change in the quantity supplied. This movement reflects the law of supply, where higher prices increase the quantity supplied and low prices decrease it. A shift in the supply curve occurs when factors other than the price of the good or service change. If the quantity supplied increases due to these changes, then the supply curve will shift to the right, whereas if the quantity supplied decreases, the supply curve will shift to the left. There are many factors that can cause a shift in the supply curve, including changes in the costs of production, the introduction of new technology, indirect taxes as subsidies, changes in the number of firms in an industry, and external shocks. Changes in the costs of production can cause the supply of a product to decrease if production costs rise, making it more expensive for firms to produce goods. However, if production costs fall, the supply of the product can increase as it becomes cheaper for firms to produce goods. The introduction of new technology can cause the supply of a product to increase if the technology enhances production efficiency, enabling firms to produce more goods at a low cost. However, if new technology is costly to implement or disrupts current processes, it could temporarily reduce supply. Indirect taxes can cause the supply of a product to decrease if they raise the overall cost of production for firms. On the other hand, if indirect taxes are reduced or removed, the supply of the product can increase as production becomes less costly. Subsidies provided by the government can cause the supply of a product to increase as they reduce the cost of production for firms, allowing them to produce more goods. If the government stops providing subsidies, the supply of the product may decrease as firms face higher production costs. Changes in the number of firms in an industry can cause the supply of a product to decrease as the producer has more competition that may take away their consumers if these new firms supply the same product at a cheaper price or a higher quality. However, if firms were to exit the market, then the supply of a product will increase as the producer has less competition and therefore more customers trying to purchase their products. External shocks, such as natural disasters, political instability, or economic crises, can cause the supply of a product to decrease if they disrupt production processes, supply chains, or resource availability. Alternatively, if an external shock leads to favorable conditions for production or trade, the supply of the product may increase. Price determination is the process of finding the right price for goods and services that meets the supply and demand of these goods and services. Equilibrium pricing occurs when the planned supply of sellers equals the planned demand of buyers. On a supply and demand graph, the equilibrium point is where the supply curve and the demand curve cross over. This is the point where the quantity of a good or service that consumers are willing to purchase at a certain price equals the quantity that producers are willing to supply at that same price. This means that there will be no surplus and no shortage. Supply and demand can be used to show excess supply and demand. Excess supply or a surplus occurs when the price is above the equilibrium price, which causes the quantity supplied to be more than the quantity demanded. This is shown as the area between the supply and demand curves above the equilibrium point. Excess demand or a shortage occurs when the price is below the equilibrium price, causing the quantity demanded to be more than the quantity supplied. This is shown between the supply and demand curves below the equilibrium point. And when there is excess demand or supply, the market works to remove these through adjustments in the price to restore the equilibrium. When there is excess demand, the price of the product is increased as consumers are more willing to pay more due to the limited amount of the product available. As the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases and the quantity supplied increases until the equilibrium is reached. When there is excess supply, the price of the product is reduced to try and bring in more customers and sell the excess supply. As the price decreases, the quantity demanded increases and the quantity supplied decreases until the equilibrium is reached. The changes in the price ensure that the supply and the demand are balanced and any surpluses and shortages are removed from the market. Supply and demand graphs can be used to show how shifts in the supply and demand curves cause changes in the price and the quantity supplied and demanded. When the demand curve shifts, the equilibrium price and quantity adjust to it. An increase in the quantity demanded shifts the curve to the right, which raises both the equilibrium price and the quantity demanded and supplied. A decrease in the quantity demanded shifts the curve to the left, which lowers both the equilibrium price and the quantity demanded and supplied. When the supply curve shifts, the equilibrium price and quantity adjust to it. An increase in the quantity supplied shifts the curve to the right, lowering the equilibrium price and raising the quantity supplied and demanded. A decrease in the quantity supplied shifts the curve to the left, increasing the equilibrium price and lowering the quantity supplied and demanded. These shifts in the curves represent real-world economic changes and show how markets adjust to new conditions, finding a new equilibrium where supply meets demand. There are many limitations to the supply and demand model. One limitation of the supply and demand model is that it is a simplified demonstration that assumes buyers and sellers have all the information, which rarely happens. As well as this, it assumes all markets are competitive, which is not the case for all markets. In addition, the supply and demand model assumes ceteris paribus, which assumes only one factor changes and everything else stays the same. The price mechanism is the process of prices in a market adjusting due to changes in supply and demand, which allows resources to be allocated efficiently and determines the distribution of goods and services. The price mechanism allocates resources through three key functions: rationing, incentives, and signaling. Rationing occurs when prices rise in response to increased demand or reduced supply, which limits the quantity demanded to consumers who are able to pay a higher price, allowing scarce resources to be allocated effectively. Incentives are created as higher prices encourage producers to supply more of a good or service as there is the potential for increased profit, while low prices encourage producers to supply less as they will receive lower profits. The signaling function is used to communicate information to producers and consumers, with rising prices indicating a scarcity or a higher demand, which signals to consumers to consume less or to purchase alternatives, and lower prices indicating an excess supply, which signals producers to reduce their production or to innovate. When there is a change in the level of demand, a firm may respond by adjusting their production, changing their prices, or reallocating their resources to meet the new market conditions. If demand increases, then the firm may increase their production to meet this demand, potentially by hiring more workers or investing more resources into their production. They may also raise their prices to maximize the revenue they receive. If demand decreases, then the firm may reduce their production so that they do not have any excess stock. They may also cut their costs to maximize profit or lower their prices to bring in more customers. Firms may also try to identify the cause of the shift in demand in order to adapt their products or marketing to meet the needs of the market. The market mechanism operates differently in niche and mass markets due to the different characteristics of each market. In a mass market, products are standardized and sold to a broad audience. Because of this, small changes in the price can significantly impact the supply and demand, with firms often competing on price to attract a wide customer base. In a niche market, products are less standardized and are targeted towards a specific segment of consumers with specialized needs or preferences. Because of this, the price mechanism is influenced by the perceived value of the products rather than the price. The prices in niche markets tend to be higher as there is lower production of each product, with firms trying to differentiate their products to compete and bring in more customers. The potential for market growth is linked to the market mechanism, as changes in price can cause an increase or decrease in supply and demand. When prices are at a level that attracts more consumers and provides adequate profits for producers, demand can increase. This encourages firms to expand their production and invest in new resources, which leads to market growth. If prices are too high or too low, they can reduce consumption or profitability, which limits the potential for growth. As well as this, the price mechanism signals opportunities for innovation and for new firms to enter the market, which can lead to market growth as new products, services, and competition is introduced. There are many methods a business can use to understand consumers, including different research methods and segmenting them into different groups. Market research is the process of gathering and analyzing information about goods and services. There are two types of research: primary and secondary. Primary research is new and original research that has not been collected yet. This can be done using surveys, questionnaires, observations, consumer panels, focus groups, interviews, experiments, and test marketing. The benefits of using primary research are that it is tailored to the exact needs of the firm, it is up to date, and no other firm will have this information. However, the limitations of using primary research are that it is time consuming and expensive to collect and difficult to conduct. Secondary research is data that has already been collected, with there being two types of secondary research: internal and external. The internal sources of secondary research include past sales figures, customer records, and pricing data. The external sources of secondary research includes government statistics, competitor information, specialist market reports, trade publications, and websites. The benefits of using secondary research are that it is often little costs, it is quicker to conduct, and it is usually based on actual research and data. However, the limitations of using secondary research are that it may be out of date, it may not be specific or accurate enough, and it can be expensive to buy market research reports if they are required. The data from research can be quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative data provide measurable statistics, such as purchase frequency, which helps predict demand volumes and identify the size of the market. Qualitative data provides subjective insights into consumer attitudes and perceptions, which gives an understanding of consumer behavior and their decision-making processes. By combining these types of research and data, businesses can make informed decisions on product development, marketing strategies, and market entry. There are many limitations to market research as a whole, particularly with sample size and bias. A small sample size may not accurately represent the broader population, which leads to unreliable results and a skewed insight into consumer behavior. This can make it difficult for the business to apply their findings to the entire market, which reduces the effectiveness of the research in guiding the decisions the business makes. Bias can further distort the results of the research, whether it is the way questions are phrased, the selection of participants, or how data is interpreted. As well as this, the participants may not answer the question truthfully, and the group of participants may not be diverse enough to represent the entire market, which can lead to a narrow perspective of the market that does not consider key market segments. Market segmentation is the process of dividing markets or customers into groups with different needs and characteristics. Doing this allows businesses to tailor their products, services, and marketing strategies to target different groups in the market more effectively. The market can be segmented into different demographics, such as age, income, gender, or ethnicity. The market can also be segmented geographically based on where people live. Markets can also be segmented by behavior, such as why people purchase certain products or how often they purchase these products. Markets can also be segmented psychologically based on interests, values, or lifestyles. Segmenting the market allows the business to enhance customer satisfaction by meeting their specific demands. This also allows businesses to allocate their resources more efficiently, focus on markets with a high potential for profit, and then gain a competitive advantage by addressing the unique needs of different groups of consumers. The competition in a market depends on the positioning of the firms, how differentiated their products and what type of market they are in. Market positioning is where the business attempts to place its products in relation to its competitors, but is also the way that products and brands are seen in relation to their competition. To do this, businesses use market maps, which is a grid that shows two features of a market, such as price and quality. Products or brands are plotted on this grid to identify gaps in the market and opportunities for differentiation. By analyzing where their product or brand sits on this map, the business can target specific consumer segments more effectively, optimize their marketing strategies, and enhance their competitive advantage. A firm can become more competitive by gaining a competitive advantage, differentiating their products, and adding value to their products or brand. The competitive advantage of a product or service is the unique features or benefits that sets it apart from its competitors. This makes the product or service more appealing to consumers and allows the business to perform more effectively in the market. Competitive advantage can be achieved through many aspects of a product or service, such as design, quality, reliability, customer service, delivery times, economies of scale, innovation, and ethical stance. Other aspects that can achieve a competitive advantage include successful promotion, branding, and advertising. If the product has a competitive advantage, then the business can use this to attract and retain customers more effectively, which will increase their market share. Product differentiation is the process of distinguishing a product or service from its competitors by highlighting its unique features or benefits that appeal to consumers. Businesses can differentiate their product in a number of ways, including emphasizing their unique selling point and having flexible prices, improving their product and brand recognition, extending their product range, and overcoming competition by creating differences in the product or service that the consumer can perceive. If the business can differentiate their product or service effectively, then they will be able to attract a specific segment of consumers that prioritize these features. Doing this allows the business to make their consumers less price sensitive so that they will be more willing to pay higher prices for their products or services. As well as this, the business will be able to improve their brand loyalty. By differentiating their products effectively, they can make it more challenging for competitors to replicate their success, which gives the business a stronger position in the market. Adding value to products and services is the process of making them more appealing by improving their quality, functionality, branding, or customer experience. This makes the product or service more desirable and differentiates it from its competitors. Adding value is important in a competitive market as it allows the business to offer more than just the product or service, which can be through improved production quality, exceptional service, or a brand story. By adding value to their products or services, the business can justify setting higher prices, build stronger customer loyalty, and put themselves in a position in the market that competitors may find difficult to match. By doing this effectively, the business will be able to attract more customers and maintain their competitive advantage in the market. Firms decide on price level and output by analyzing the market, their costs, and the competition to maximize their profits without losing customers. To remain competitive, firms must consider the prices of their competitors, as setting the price too high can push customers away, while setting the price too low can reduce their profits. Firms also need to take into account their own costs of production and how willing their customers are to pay higher prices to find the most profitable level of output. As well as this, the firm must consider their position in the market and how differentiated they are to ensure that higher prices will not significantly impact demand. Firms balance these factors to find a price and output level that optimizes revenue, covers costs, and effectively compete in the market. The nature of the market that a firm is in will force them to implement different strategies in order to stay competitive. A stable market has consistent demand, established competition, and predictable changes. In a stable market, competition tends to be based on small improvements over time, cost efficiency, and customer loyalty. Firms will try to maintain their market share using long-term strategies. A dynamic market has sudden changes in consumer preferences, advancements in technology, and improvements in competitiveness. In a dynamic market, the firm must be innovative and be able to adapt quickly to changes in trends. In a dynamic market, firms must constantly differentiate themselves to ensure they do not lose their customers. Thank you for watching this video on introducing the market. I'll see you in the next lesson.